Hello students, today's agenda is to check homework. We're going to be factoring polynomials and you will be able to work on 2.7. Today students will be able to factor trinomials when a is greater than 1. Before we do that, let's start with something that we will be needing for the lesson today, and it's factor by grouping. So basically when it says factor by grouping means that you form from this quadrinomial, you form two groups. And so to do that, we're going to divide this, leave this sign to this term. And so we start by saying, what is the greatest common factor for AC and AD? And so I looked that both have A, so that's my greatest common factor. And I start dividing. AC divided by A, well, A cancels and all you have is C. For the other one, AD divided by A, cancel the A, and you only have D. On the other side, we look for the greatest common factor and both have B, so that's my greatest common factor. And we start dividing. BC divided by B, B cancels and all you have is C. BD divided by B is D, and because the B canceled. The other part, and this is the tricky part that you have to see, we notice that CD is both the same for both groups. And so what we're doing here is distributive property of these two. From previous lessons, if you remember, let's say that we have C and D here, C plus D, but the A is multiplying with that CD, B is also multiplying with that CD, and I don't know if you recall from previous lessons that is the same as if we have A plus B, because when we have two factors like this, two binomials, we multiply first the A and then the B. Okay, so it's A and B is the same here. Okay, so sorry, it's like this. Okay, so you're multiplying first the A with this two and then the B. And so this is basically, when we're factoring by grouping, this is what it means. These are the two factors of this quadrinomial. Okay, so this is something that if you don't understand, make sure you rewind because we will need it for the rest of the lesson. And if you watch it once or twice or maybe 3 times and you still don't get it, maybe go forward and maybe with the examples you might understand it. Okay, so let's start with the first trinomial. We have 2x squared plus 13x plus 15. We already learned how to factor using the diamond, and we're going to continue to use the diamond in here. However, we have some information additional to what we had before. Usually you would put C in here and B in here. What does that mean? The coefficient of x squared is always A, the coefficient of x alone with no square is B, and the constant number is always C. So you used to have C in here, meaning 15, and B in here, meaning 13. However, today we're going to multiply A times C and put the answer here. So 2 times 15 equals 30. And B continues to be here, which is 13. So the only difference is that we multiply this term with this term, multiply, and put the answer right there. That's the only difference when we're putting the information. There are other things, but for now, that's what we're looking for. Now, if you remember from previous lesson, this is the number what? Two numbers that multiply equals 30, but when you add them equals 13. Well, it can be 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10. Oh, 3 times 10, when you add them equals 13, so that's what the answer is, 2 and 10. Now, in here we have 13x. Right? We're going to rewrite this same trinomial, But instead of using 13x, we're going to use this information, the 3 and the 10, to replace that. Because if I put 3x plus 10x, okay, I'm just using these two to replace this. We still have the 13x. And I bring down the 2x squared. I bring down the 15. And then I start grouping, which is what I did right before we started the first exercise. And so we look for the greatest common factor for 2 and 3 is 1, so we don't put it. The greatest common factor for x is the variable with the smallest exponent. And so we start dividing. 2x squared divided by x is 2x. Remember that if you need to see it, it's 2x squared divided by x. Basically, 2 divided by 1 is 2. X squared divided by x. Remember that we keep the base, subtract the exponents. 2 minus the chiquitito. Okay, so it's 1. And then in here, 3x divided by x, the x cancels, and you only have 3. The greatest common factor for 10 and 15 is 5. And the variable, we don't have a variable here, so we do not include the variable out here, only if it was in both. And so we start 10 divided by 5, 2. Then we don't have x, so we just bring it. We don't have it in here. And then 15 divided by 5, 3. The important part here is that you notice that this 2x plus 3 is the same as 2x plus 3. Remember that it's like doing distributive properties, so we need to make sure that they are the same. 2x plus 3. And then this x, this 5 goes in the other. Okay, those that are outside go in this parenthesis. So x plus 5. Okay, and that's going to be our 2 factors. You can always multiply using FOIL. So combine like terms, and it should come back to this answer. Okay, let's do another one. Again, the first thing you want to do is multiply a times c. So a times c, 2 times 15 is 30, and then leave b here, which is negative 11. So when we have a negative down here and a positive up here, if it's positive, that means that both of them are either positive or both are negative. Since this is negative, that means that both are going to be negative factors. And so what 2 numbers multiply equals 30? Again, we can do 1 times 30. No, that will be 31. 2 times 15, that will be 16. 3 times 10, that's 13. Other factors will be 5 times 6. Oh, when we add 5 plus 6, and we are adding because both are negative, okay? Same sign, we add. And so those are the ones that are going to replace this term so that we can do. So this stays the same, the plus 15 stays the same. It's just replacing negative 11x by negative 5x and negative 6x. And so now we're ready to group. The greatest common factor for 2 and negative 5 is just 1. And for x squared and x, that means that one number goes into 2 and 5. There is no other number other than 1 that goes into both, so that's why we don't put a number. And then x squared and x, well, x goes into both, and we start dividing. 2x squared divided by x, only one of the x's cancels, so it's going to be 2x. Negative 5x divided by x, the x cancels, and so I get negative 5. What goes into, oh, I said also that if the first one is a negative, we're going to have negative in here. What goes into both 6 and 15? 3 goes into both, and then there is no variable in here, so I don't put the variable. And I start negative 6 divided by negative 3, 2, I bring down the x. 15, positive divided by negative, negative. 15 divided by 3 is 5. And so again, look how these are the same. Very, very important that they are the same, because we're going to be doing kind of like distributive property with both the x and the -3, right? So we want to make sure that the x multiplies the same number as the -3 in here. Okay, so x is going to be multiplying that, and the -3 is going to be multiplying the same number. So these are my two factors. Okay, one more. We do the diamond. So 3 times -1 is -3, and b is -2. Remember that we multiply a and c. We multiply them so that we can get the one on top to figure out what two numbers replace the -2. And so two factors that multiply negative, oh, I have a one positive and one negative. That means that we're going to be subtracting. And so it will be 3 and 1. And when we subtract, it's -2. So that means that the bigger one is negative. Okay, and the smallest. So now, negative times positive, negative. 3 times 1 is 3. And when we subtract, 3 minus 1 is 2, and keep the sign of the greater one. Okay, the first one stays the same. The last one stays the same. But the middle one gets replaced with the -3x, positive 1x, and we don't need the 1 in there. Again, this -3x and positive x is the same as -2x, okay? So nothing is changing, it just looks different. It's like grouping them. And so we look, what goes into both 3 and 3? 3. Oh, I forgot. What goes into x squared and x? X. Sorry about that. It's going to look a little messy, but that's 3x. And so 3x squared divided by 3x, x. -3x divided by 3x, -1. What goes into both 1 and 1? Only 1. And we start dividing. X divided by 1, x. -1 divided by 1, -1. Again, we get the same. And the ones that are the same, we put it in one side. And the ones that are lonely outside, we put them in the other parentheses. Okay, so that's going to be our two factors. Okay, it seems that it's getting a little easier. So again, we do our diamond, multiply a and c to put it in there. Okay, and so 3 times -4 is -12. In here, if there is no coefficient, that means that there is a 1, so I put it in here. Again, when we have a negative over here, that means that we have one positive, one negative, and also that we're going to be subtracting. And to have a difference, meaning a subtraction, and we get 1, that means that when we multiply them, they're consecutive numbers. So I'm thinking right now 3 and 4. And this is positive. That means that the biggest number is positive, the smallest one is negative. Remember, you need 1 and 1 because the product is negative. So these numbers, multiply equals -12, added equals +1. This is going to be replacing the x, so the first one stays the same. The last one stays the same. It's just this gets replaced by -3x, +4x. One thing that somebody asked, what if I change them? What if I switch them? The answers are going to come up the same. It's just that the groupings, whatever you got in here, the answer will be here. And whatever you got here, the answer will be here. So it's okay. It doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to group now and look for the greatest common factor. What is the greatest common factor of 3 and -3? 3. Of x squared and x? X. Remember, we get the variable with the smallest exponent. And so we start. 3x squared divided by 3x, that's x. Negative 3x divided by 3x, negative 1. Basically, 3 divided by 3 is 1, and x divided by x equals 1, and 1 times 1 is 1. For this part, we see that what goes into 4 and 4? 4. And for the variable we only have in here, we don't have anything in here, so don't include it in here. If there is, you have to have variables in both terms to be able to divide by that. And so we start 4x divided by 4, x. Negative 4 divided by 4, negative 1. Again, these are the same. They have to be the same, otherwise that means that something went wrong. And on the other side is the ones outside. So 3x plus 4. And so these are my factors. Again, you can always check 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times negative 1 is negative 3x. 4 times x is 4x. And then 4, so let me put this one in here. And 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. As you can see, combining this is equals to x. We bring down the 4. 3x squared. Notice how, whoops, I'm so sorry. I was doing the multiplication, but I wasn't showing. So 3x times x, 3x squared. 3x times negative 1, negative 3x. 4 times x, 4x. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Combine these like terms. And if you owe 3x and you have 4x, that's equals to x. And the other ones you just bring down. So you can see that this is the same as the beginning. So these are correct. So now you can do 2.7 and have fun.